Hello friends, I'm Tex Mars. You know, since the beginning of time, men have sought to exalt themselves really beyond the stars. They have sought even to build such things as the great tower of Babel in Babylon. Bring themselves toward God to make themselves into God. Lucifer made a very idle boast, and it's recorded in Isaiah 14 verse 12, that he would be like the Most High. He would ascend unto the stars. Of course, we know the fate of Lucifer. It's revealed in the book of Revelation. So many things today to talk about the space program, NASA, the astronauts. You know, there's been so much heroism, so many incredible discoveries since the days of the space program beginning with the end of World War II, really, and escalating in the 60s and 70s, and even today, with various Chandra X-ray telescopes, the Hubble, I just call it the spy telescope in space, the very many space shuttles and so forth. Incredible things. And yet there have been accusations that NASA is responsible for hoaxes, even for murders, for scandals and cover-ups. I want to give credit, of course, to astronauts who are deserving. And let's face it, no doubt many are. But at the same time, I think we need to look at some of the darker aspects of NASA. You know, it was the report from Iron Mountain that first revealed the fact that the space program was one of the 5 or 6 different projects that the Illuminati had planned for America and the world. They planned the environmental program. They planned what they called blood games. These could be suitable substitutes for war, read the report from Iron Mountain. The space program, why? I believe when we dig deep into America's space program, the NASA moonshots and right on up until today, we're going to find out that there is magic, alchemy, occultism, Freemasonry deception. Now this may shock many of you who have never heard these things. We're going to look at the deep occultism that is found in the NASA space program. You will see, for example, proof that the manager of many of NASA's top space programs was in fact a 33rd degree Mason. You're going to see proof that many of the best known and celebrity astronauts were high-level Freemasons and part of the Masonic Lodge. You're going to see evidence today that there has even been planted on the moon by a 33rd degree Mason astronaut, secretively a flag, a double-headed eagle pennant or flag. You're going to see proof that the astronauts have claimed they even have, these Masons who are astronauts have claimed they have established a Masonic lodge on the moon. That may sound a little silly to you. Is there an occult, esoteric reason for this? I believe there was even an occultic Masonic ceremony conducted on the moon when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon in Apollo 1. And we're going to give you evidence of that occult ritual that, no doubt, in my mind, was held. And you decide for yourself when you see all of these things. We're going to see evidence of amazing things and even occult numerology in symbolism that's been used by the space program. Now, before we begin, let me say very quickly that God's Word has a lot to say about man's quest for discoveries in space. We start off, for example, remembering that God said He would reveal all secrets in the last days. What men whisper in closets, someday God said would be shouted from the housetops. Today, we're going to tell you about some of those secrets. Back in 1972, a man named Marshall McLuhan wrote about the media and how the government was able to use the media to deceive people. how it was used even for mind control, magic, alchemy. He wrote a book called Take Today, in which he said this. He said that only puny secrets need to be protected. Only the puniest of secrets need to be protected. The tiniest, the merest secrets. Because, he said, big discoveries, big secrets are protected by the incredulity of the public. In other words, the people, the masses, will not believe big secrets. Even when it's revealed to them, they will not believe it. Now, we know, for example, there is no doubt that John F. Kennedy was assassinated by a conspiracy. But do many people believe that? Many people say, no, it was a lone nut assassin. Former President Gerald Ford told us that. Of course, they don't realize he's a 33rd degree Mason. Earl Warren of the Warren Commission, he was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He told us that in his Warren Commission report. It was just a lone nut assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald. They don't realize that Earl Warren, who did head the Warren Commission, was a 33rd degree Mason. No, my friends, people are willing to accept that there are tiny secrets. But the murder of a president? No, there could not be secrets. People believe themselves to be too wise, too all-knowing, too smart, too shrewd. Why, we would never be deceived. We are so intelligent. We read the newspapers. We watch ABC, NBC, CBS. We've seen the NASA space shots. We saw those astronauts land on the moon. There could not be hoaxes. There could not be secrets kept from us. We know everything. Amazing, isn't it? And when you come out with such secrets and reveal them, they will call you a conspiracy nut, a crazy, a wacko, a fringe person, and so forth. Well, today I present the evidence, and you don't have to worry about what the media says, my friends. Here at Power of Prophecy, you decide for yourself. Now, let's go very quickly into what God said in the Bible. I want you to understand there's a lot in the Bible talking about space and God's efforts in the whole creation. For example, it says that Jesus, in fact, created all the worlds. That's Colossians 1, verses 16 through 17. All things were made by Him, it says in John 1:3, and without Him was not anything made that was made. He knows about outer space. He knows about the billions, trillions, zillions, gazillions, whatever of galaxies that exist. He created them. It says, for by Him were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, invisible and visible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by Him. And He is before all things, and by Him all things consist. He knows the secrets, doesn't He? And maybe He's going to allow us to reveal them. You know, God, the intelligence of God is so fantastic. We think that rocket and space scientists are sharp or intelligent. They're like Werner von Braun's and Einstein's. But listen to what it says in Psalm 47:4 of God. It says, He telleth the number of the stars. He calleth them all by their names. Well, NASA and our astronomers love to give names to various constellations in the sky. There's the Eagle Nebula. There's the Orion constellation. And even the little spots on the moon, as you will see, where the Apollo 1 landed first, they call it Tranquility Base. They give the names, but God already has a name for every star. Imagine how many stars there are. Imagine how many names there must be. And you know, my friends, the sad thing about NASA is they've never given glory to God. When Neil Armstrong supposedly put his foot down on the moon, he said this was, one small step for mankind. For man, one giant leap for mankind. He never thanked God. There's no mention of God. And yet, we read in Psalm 19, verse 1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth His handiwork. The heavens declare the glory of God. But God was not given the glory. That was one small step for man and a giant leap for mankind, said Neil Armstrong. And I understand that because Mr. Armstrong, I believe, is a Mason, although that is not public knowledge. And certainly Buzz Aldrin, who was with him, was also a Mason, and that will be proven in just a moment. We have to remember, too, God said in His Word, Mark 13, verse 31, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. And then there is this prophecy we read. The powers of the heavens shall be shaken in the last days, said the Lord, and the stars of heaven shall fall, and the earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, the sea and the waves roaring, and men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. So, momentous events. And maybe what we're going to see about man's premier space program today are just a foretaste of tragedy and sad things that are to come. Now, I want to first talk to you, if I can. Now, we're getting into some of the intellectual things, but we're going to get into some of the meat. You stay with us today, okay? We've got a lot for you. I want to talk to you a little bit about magic and alchemy, so we can see that the space program itself has been used as a means to alchemically transform the mind of human beings and bring people away from God into some strange notion that we can do all things. Through men, we can conquer the heavens. The Illuminati can even conquer space. And Freemasonry is the vehicle. Dr. Alan Boudreau, in the foreword to his book, The Meaning of Masonry, wrote, in this new Aquarian age. Now, you remember that because the first space craft was named Aquarius. We'll talk about that in a minute. All of the names of the various spacecraft, even the space shuttles, all have occult significance, new age meanings. In this new Aquarian age, wrote Dr. Boudreau, Freemasonry may well be the vehicle enabling us to enter that inner chamber where we can join the true initiates and share experiences now veiled from all but a handful of brethren. Veiled from all but a handful of brethren. The inner chamber. Freemasonry. The new Aquarian age. Michael Hoffman, written some tremendous things, in Dark Side of a Bad Moon, an article he wrote in Paranoia magazine, he wrote, there is and has been since this nation's inception a secret society that practices what the ancients termed sorcery, but which is nothing more than a kind of mind control as yet unknown to the public. A mind control, a form of mind control, a kind of mind control as yet unknown to the public, being practiced on us today. Robert Anton Wilson, a PhD, in his book Cosmic Trigger, says theater is, and that's what what we're going to see here, ritual theater in the skies, even in space, on our TV screens through the space program. Theater is and has always been magic. Magic. Are we seeing magic in the space program? Antero Ali, in his book All Rights Reversed, he's an occultist and a devotee of secret societies. He said, perhaps the most mysterious and fascinating areas of ritual work, occult rituals, involve those triggering mechanisms producing altered states of consciousness. Has NASA and our space program, through the moonshots, through its various programs and projects, been able to produce altered states of consciousness in human beings? I recall Daniel chapter 8 verses 24 through 25 talking about the Antichrist, the great beast to come in the last days. It says, and his power shall be mighty, and through his policy also he shall cause craft, that's witchcraft, to prosper in his hand. Is that what we're looking at, Masonic witchcraft in the NASA space program? John Woo, a professor at Auburn University, says the truth is to know that everything is an illusion. Have we all been visited by illusion with the NASA space program? David Hume, many years ago, centuries ago, in his classic a textbook, The Natural History of Religion, wrote, "We are placed in this world as in a great theater where the sources and causes of every event are entirely concealed from us." And then Dr. Albert Mackey, and I'll end with this, in his book, The Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, a major source, define the word hoodwink. Hoodwink, as used in Freemasonry. He says hoodwink is the secrecy, silence, and darkness in which the mysteries of our Masonic art should be preserved from the unhallowed gaze of the profane. You're the profane. You're the ignorant masses. And they shall keep you in secrecy, silence, and darkness while they practice their mysterious Masonic art. That's what Dr. Albert Mackey had to say. Now, I want to read to you a quote. It's on the screen now. This is Henry Clausen. Today, the Sovereign Grand Commander of Freemasonry is a man named Kleinknecht. But the previous Supreme Commander, especially all the way back in the 70s and 80s, was a man named Henry Clausen. He wrote a book called Emergence of the Mystical. Emergence of the Mystical. 33rd degree. Remember now, Sovereign Grand Commander of International Freemasonry. He said, "Today we are at the threshold of a new era. All signs point to this fact. We look toward a transformation into a new age, using, however, the insight and wisdom of the ancient mystics. This new world view," wrote Mr. Clausen, "is emerging because there has been a recent correlation between modern physics and the mysticism of Eastern religions." My friends, a mystic is one who practices mysticism, magic, occultism, witchcraft. And he says sciences such as physics are now coming together. Rocket sciences, space sciences are coming together with witchcraft. And I believe they are. I want to mention to you, this is a book by Clausen that should be noted. It's called Clausen's Commentaries on Morals and Dogma. That's Albert Pike's book. Please note in gold embossing on the front cover of this book, you'll see the great double-headed eagle of Freemasonry, the flag that was planted on the moon by Buzz Aldrin, 33rd degree, and a Mason on Apollo 1. Remember, he was one of the first two men to land on the moon, he and Neil Armstrong. He planted a flag that had this double-headed eagle symbol on it. We'll discuss the meaning of that a little bit later. But I want you to know that it's revealed in this book that Henry Clausen was an attorney at the highest levels of the U.S. government in the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration. And when the Pearl Harbor incident occurred, so many hundreds of our sailors and military men slaughtered by the Japanese, December 7th, 1941. Many people said there must be a cover-up. Something happened here. How could this possibly happen? How could we be caught unawares? And that was true because Roosevelt knew in advance that it was coming. The Japanese were coming, but he covered it up. But how did he get by with this great scandal for so many years? Only recently has this been released to the public, and then only on page 48 of local newspapers. Very few people know that Roosevelt, what a monster he was. He knew in advance, and he let our men die there at Pearl Harbor. He wanted World War II. He wanted it. It was an Illuminati project. Now listen to me very carefully. In this book, it's revealed that Clausen, a 33rd degree Mason, like his brother, Franklin D. Roosevelt, also a high-level Mason, was appointed to head up the commission to look into what really happened at Pearl Harbor. And of course, they got two scapegoats, one Admiral Kimmel, and blamed it on them. They covered up the whole thing. You know, right after Waco occurred, and the burning to death of the innocent people at Waco, the Branch Davidians, They had a congressional committee that met. It was headed by Senator Orlin Specter, a 33rd degree Mason. Henry Clausen, Sovereign Grand Commander of Freemasonry, 33rd degree, was head of the commission on the Pearl Harbor tragedy. It was a cover-up. Now, let's talk very quickly about some things that we really must look into. We're going to look at the meaning of symbols. Did you know that in the occult world, a symbol stands for something else? A symbol has a meaning. Many people used to wonder why in the Bible it says that the children of Israel, when they left Egypt, they divorced themselves from God by worshiping the golden calf in the desert. Who would be so stupid as to worship a calf made out of gold? A little critter with horns, and hey, no one would worship a calf, would they? Well, we know that Hindus worship cows and calves, but that's different. Certainly the children of Israel weren't that stupid. Let me tell you something, my friends. That calf represented something else. It represented the great mother goddess of ancient Egypt, the goddess Isis. A symbol is something that represents something else, something hidden, something esoteric. That, of course, is the meaning of the all-seeing eye on our $1 bill. It's an esoteric symbol that means something else. Now, one of the forerunners of the Masonic Lodge, the Knights Templar, came up with this symbol. And they had idols in their temples, in their lodges. They and their sovereign grand commander, you might call him, the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. And they worshiped this creature, and there are many symbols on this creature that I could tell you about. But one thing I want you to know is he is a hermaphrodite, meaning he is both male and female. In the occult world, the two opposites will eventually be synthesized and come together, because it is the devil's cruel and lying boast that heaven and hell will be brought together under his command, and that God will answer to him, and that Lucifer will become God of the world, having brought all the world, black and white, evil and good, God and the devil together as one, under the angel of light, who is Lucifer. My friends, when we talk about Freemasonry and the space program, we need to understand this. Here's an article that came out several years back by a man who's a tremendous writer. Washington Dateline published this. This writer, his name is Robert Goldsberg. He wrote an article called Superman in Space, or Disciple of the Devil. Superman in Space, or Disciple of the Devil. I was interested in this article. Let me tell you some of what he said in this article. He talked about John Glenn, Senator John Glenn, the elderly senator from Ohio, and how even at the age of 77 years old, this liberal Democrat was able to get NASA to let him go on one more space ride into the space shuttle. Interesting about this thing is not only that he was an elderly gentleman, and people say 77 years old, and he's coming back. See, he was an astronaut before he became a U.S. senator. In fact, that's how he became famous, as an astronaut. But what was he doing up there? Well, Mr. Goldsboro points out that John Glenn just happened to be a 33rd degree Mason. And he talked about how even the words that were used by NASA spokesman James Oberg had Masonic overtones to them, talking about the flight of their 33rd degree Mason, John Glenn. He said the space trip was mostly symbolic. That's what James Oberg now, the public relations man for the NASA Space Agency, that the space trip of Senator Glenn was mostly symbolic. And this would be the completion of a cycle and the dawning of a new age for NASA's space program. The dawning of a new age, symbolic, the completion of a cycle. And Mr. Goldsboro says that to the uninitiated, these phrases are no doubt meaningless. But to the members of the craft, that is, Freemasonry, the dawning of a new age and these other symbols and these other words are full of meaning and import. And he goes on and talks about that. He says, in their book report, The Enterprise Mission, researchers Richard Hoagland and Michael Baer reveal, quote, it is well established that many astronauts, including Alan Shepard and Edwin Buzz Aldrin, were also Masons. What is not commonly known is that most of the NASA hierarchy, especially at the time of the Mercury mission, were also members of the secretive Masonic information organization. And he goes on to talk about various of the Masons who had control of the space program. Now, I want you to know that when you talk about Freemasonry, you have to understand they have a god they call the Grand or Great Architect. Okay? The Grand or the Great Architect of the universe. This is not Jesus Christ. In fact, somebody sent me this little booklet. It's called The Masonic Manual and Code of the Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of Georgia, printed back in 1940. Now, please understand that every state has its own headquarters lodge. So this particular publication comes only from the state of Georgia, but you will see many just like this. Now, in this publication, I thought it was very interesting that they have a little matter here where they tell people how to conduct ceremonies, the opening and closing of their ceremonies. And it says very clearly that their prayer, which is addressed to the most holy and glorious Lord God, the great architect of the universe. But there's a little footnote. And let me read to you what the footnote says. It says, this untranslatable word, meaning the word, the name of God, this untranslatable word, the same in all languages, is a name of the great God of Egypt. The Masonic God is the great God of Egypt. And what is the name of the great God of Egypt? It is Osiris. Osiris, the great father god of Egypt. Is that the one to whom all Masons pray? Well, here is an article out of the Canadian Press, back to Winnipeg Free Press of November 19, 1994, talked about in Montreal there was the cult called the Solar Temple, and police found a total of 53 people dead in Quebec, Canada, and in Switzerland who had been members of this order of the Solar Temple. But it says that these people all committed suicide, all committed a joint suicide together, the members of the order of the Solar Temple. And it states that they worshipped a god whom they called Osiris. Osiris. And interestingly enough, they believed, it says here at the very top you can see, that the cult slayings and suicides were linked to plans for space travel. Very, very interesting. You know, there is an undercurrent of darkness in the NASA space program. Here's from Time.com, TimeMagazine.com, a long article about Andrea Yates, who killed her 5 children by drowning them in her bathtub. Her husband was a NASA engineer. Now, you will want from me proof that most or many of the astronauts in leading positions have been Masons. I will be glad to give you that. Now, we have a book here called Freemasonry in American History. Freemasonry in American History. It's written by Alan Roberts. It's published by the largest Masonic press in America, McCoy Publishing. Here's a picture, by the way, of Mr. Alan Roberts. In all of the Masonic world, he is known as one of the greatest historians who has ever lived. And I think you'll be interested to find out some of the things that he says here in Freemasonry in American History. Now, beginning on page 376, and I think this is interesting. This is chapter 33, by the way. Chapter 33. Remember, 33 is the highest degree in Freemasonry. There is the article, or the chapter entitled, Eyes in the Sky. Eyes in the Sky. And he talks about the space program of the United States and also the Soviet Union. He says that Lyndon B. Johnson, for example, President of the United States, was responsible for much of the space program. The Johnson Space Center in Houston is named after him. That Lyndon Johnson was a master mason. A master mason. He says that it was a historic day for the United States. This is on page 378. On February 20, 1962, when John Glenn Jr. became the first American to orbit the Earth. He was a Mason. In fact, he talks about that Glenn had petitioned Concord Lodge 688 in Ohio for the degrees in Freemasonry. It was in 1978 when he became a Mason, and he went on to become a 33rd degree, etc., etc., etc. Now, we go on a little bit further here, and by the way, it talks about Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, at the time of most of the key events of the space program, also was a 33rd degree. Talks about Earl Warren, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, at the time of the Kennedy assassination, a 33rd degree Mason. It notes that even Johnson's opponent, when he ran for president, Barry Goldwater from Arizona, Senator Barry Goldwater, was a 33rd degree Mason. And then on page 382, it talks about the space race again. It says, in 1962, the United States did one better than the Russians by sending Wally Schirra Jr., a Freemason, into space for 9 hours. A lot of occult numerology. 9 hours, the Mason, Wally Schirra, was sent into space. 9 is the ultimate number of the occult, because 6 plus 6 plus 6, 666, equals 18. Add the 1 and the 8 together and you get 9. 9 conceals within itself the number 666. He says that another Mason, L. Gordon Cooper, orbited the Earth on May 15. 1 plus 5 equals 6. In the year 63, 6 plus 3 equals 9. And then he says that on December the 4th, 1965, Frank Borman and James Lavelle, Mr. Lavelle, also a Mason, were into space. On the 15th of December, 65, Schirra, a Mason, and Thomas Stafford, later become a general astronaut, also a Freemason, were sent on a special mission in space in Gemini spacecraft. And then in 1966, listen to this, my friends. In 1966, there were 6 teams of astronauts who went into space. Of these, Buzz Aldrin Jr. was a Mason. He went on to become a 33rd degree. I want to repeat that. In 66, 6 teams of astronauts were sent into space. 6, 6, 6. It mentions it in 1967, 6 plus 7 equals 13. That's the unlucky number. That's the supernatural number of evil, of witchcraft. 13, the year 67. 6 plus 7 equals 13. In that year, on the 27th day of January, 2 plus 7 equals 9, the number of the beast 666, 3 astronauts, the unholy trinity number, Edward White, Roger Chaffee, and Virgil Grissom. The latter, it says here, a member of the Masonics, Freemasonry's Mitchell Lodge number 228 in Indiana, were killed. They were killed while rehearsing for a space shot. It says they have been the only ones to sacrifice their lives in the American effort to conquer outer space. Later on, however, the Challenger 7 were lost. It goes on to talk about others in space, for example. It says the greatest gift of all came on July 20th, 1969. 69. 69. The number 6 and the number 9. And you add 6 and 9 together, you get 15. 1 plus 5 equals 6. 69. The eagle has landed. thrilled uncountable millions of people on earth, says this book. The eagle has landed. Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin Jr., a Freemason, became the first human beings to step foot on the moon. This from Freemasonry's own key source. Now, let's look at another book, and I think this is very fascinating. This is called The Art and Architecture of Freemasonry. It's by James Stevens Curl. Has a lot of interesting things in it. You know, when you talk about space and spacecraft, even the shapes of them, this is from an obelisk sundial. The Masons, of course, are very big on anything that has to do with the pagan religions. Do those not look like spacecraft sitting ready to take off up into space? Quite interesting, isn't it? Now, that is a Masonic symbol. Then let's go a little further here. This is from over in in France. A Mason named Ladeau developed this incredible structure. Looks like something from the space program, this orb-shaped creation. But what it was a huge mausoleum at a French Masonic cemetery. This was, of course, back in the 1700s. Isn't it odd that even back then, these creations would become so prominent? Here is another one from France. This is called a monument from Victory Square that was exhibited in Liberty Hall. A lot of the French Revolution, of course, was Masonic. But here we have something that seems like it's ready as a spacecraft ready to lift off. And what it really is a Masonic monument. Now, the most interesting of all, of course, and it's odd that this would be in a book called The Art and Architecture of Freemasonry, but here is a picture of an ancient painting of the Tower of Babel in Babylon. Fascinating that this Mason says that this tower was built by the earliest of Freemasons. They call themselves the builders. The Tower of Babel, built by Masons, this author says. Now, interestingly enough, it says in Jeremiah 51, chapter 51, verse 53, something very fascinating. We read, "Though Babylon shall mount up to heaven, and though she should fortify the height of her strength, yet from me shall spoilers come unto her, saith the Lord." Fascinating. Though Babylon should mount up to heaven. Is the astronaut program another attempt to mount up to heaven by the builders, the Freemasons of the 20th and 21st centuries? You know, several years ago, a good friend of this ministry, Dean Grace, sent me a copyrighted work that he had done. He is an expert on Masonic handshakes. And one of the things he does as a hobby, I suppose, is to review both ancient and new movies coming out. And he's been able to find incredible numbers of Masonic handshakes in those movies. One of the movies that he told me about was a movie called Moonshot, put out in 1994 by the Turner Broadcasting System. And he stated that this was about the ill-fated Apollo 13, you know, the one that had to come back to Earth and abort the mission. And they made a famous movie with Tom Hanks, the Academy Award-winning actor, about the Apollo 13 aircraft. This is the actual documentary, the archives from NASA themselves that were in this movie Moonshot, put out by the Turner Broadcasting System. And you're going to see the scene now. We're back here on Earth finding out the good news, supposedly, of the spacecraft having landed safely on Earth. They're at the Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas. There's going to be a flurry of 6 joyous Master Mason handshakes being exchanged by the mission controllers. And Dean Grace records them. Let's look at these 6 consecutive handshakes right now. Here's the first. Number 2. Number 3. number 4, number 5, and number 6. 6 handshakes of Masons in the movie Moon Shot. And these are the bigwigs, by the way, of mission control. Now here's a page out of the book entitled Freemasonry Exposed, back in 1826 by Captain William Morgan. I'd like you to see, of course, he exposes many of their handshakes. And notice this handshake. Is that not the same handshake that you saw as number 6 there among the exchanges by the Masons at mission control? Notice the thumb going over in the most unique way. And then we have a Masonic book I'd like to show you where you have, again, the Masonic handshake shown. And you have, by the way, the infinity sign of 8 below and above, meaning a combination of above and below, God and Satan being united as one. That's the meaning also of the double eagle symbol. And there you have the Masonic handshake being given as well. Now, it's interesting when we look at Freemasonry, we have to understand the deep occultism that is involved. And then when we look at the space program, we again see this deep occultism. Dr. Wernher von Braun was the head of scientific research for NASA for many, many years. He recently passed away. He was brought over as a Nazi scientist after World War II under a very secret operation called Operation Paperclip. Very secret. He and other scientists were brought over. You see, Dr. Wernher von Braun worked at the Peenemünde rocket base for Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany during World War II. He helped to develop the V-1 and V-2 rockets that crashed into cities of Great Britain. They would fly these rockets. They would take off from Peenemünde in Germany and head over to Great Britain. And they caused tremendous damage there. And now, at the same time, we wanted to have our own missile or rocket program in the United States. And we brought Dr. Wernher von Braun over. But he made a statement in 1959 that I think was significant while he was head of our space research program here in the United States. Dr. Wernher von Braun gave every indication that NASA had somehow opened the gateway of evil and that evil spirits had come through. Let's see the quote by Dr. Braun. He said, quote, "We find ourselves faced by powers which are far greater than we had hitherto assumed, and whose base of operations is at present unknown to us." Powers. Base of operations unknown. What kind of powers were these that NASA was facing? Maybe part of the answer came about on Christmas Day 1968 as Apollo 8 circumnavigated the moon. Here is a story written in the Paranoia magazine of all places talking about the extraordinary event. It says that, by the way, astronaut James Lovell, who's a Mason, was there. You will recall that the Sea of Tranquility was where the Apollo craft were landing, a place on the moon that didn't have any significant rock formations or something, so they call it the Sea of Tranquility or Tranquility Base. But when the Apollo landed there, it was characterized by an odd serenade of assorted whistles and mechanical sounds that came out upon the landing there, leading mission control back here in the United States to ask the astronauts if they had any company up there. Very interesting. What company might they have met on the moon? Some people say that there might have been either extraterrestrial or demonic entities that they came in contact with. In a magazine a newsletter called The Prophetic Times, the author talked about at the turn of this century into the new millennium, there would be the opening of the chamber, the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid. And he said in Egypt, and he said this is going to draw much attention by the media and the whole world at the dawning of the year 2000. But he said something, I want to quote him. He said the opening is being guided, that's the opening to the chamber of the Great Pyramid, is being guided by the Egyptian man who is the same man who planned the landing of Apollo 11 on the moon. And the chamber to the Great Pyramid will be open when the constellations are in the exact place they were on July 20th, 1969, when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong took their first steps on the moon. What is the connection with the Egyptian pyramid and this moonshot? The gentleman who puts out the Prophetic Times went on to say, rumor has it that this has something to do with the worship of the Egyptian god Osiris. Now, let me read to you, because I have for you here the actual description by NASA. You'll see their little logo here, and on this paper, there's the NASA, and here's where they talked about the Apollo crew, okay? Let me tell you what they say. This picture, this is the description of this picture. It says, here are the members of the prime crew of the Apollo 13 lunar landing mission. Astronauts James Lovell, commander, Thomas Mattingly, command module pilot, and Fred Heist Jr., lunar module pilot. They're seated in front of a scene of the Lagoon Nebula with the mission insignia and two items of early navigation in the foreground. Represented in the Apollo 13 emblem at the center is Apollo, the sun god of Greek mythology, symbolizing that the Apollo flights have extended the light of knowledge to all mankind. There is also the Latin phrase ex luna scientia. Let's just look at that here on the symbol again. If you look very close, you'll see this ex luna scientia, Latin inscription there on the official emblem. It says, the Latin phrase ex luna scientia means from the moon knowledge. And then it says, to the side of the emblem is the Hindu astrolabe in Sanskrit. So this is the Hindu astrolabe. It says the Hindu astrolabe was used by the ancients to predict the position of celestial bodies. And then on the other side of the emblem is the octant, which was used in 1790 to determine the altitude of celestial bodies from aboard ships by mariners. This instrument right here, that looks very much, when you look at it closely, it appears to be something like the square and compass on the Masonic symbol that you find so frequently on Masonic lodge buildings and temples and structures. But by the way, the Apollo name itself, for the Apollo spacecraft missions, I want to refer you to chapter 9 of the book of Revelation, verse 11. Remember I told you about the number 9, which conceals 666 in it? Listen to this. It talks about the perhaps millions, legions of devils that are released in the last days to come forth and torment mankind. It says, and they had a king over him, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. My friends, Apollyon, is the angel of the bottomless pit, the dark angel. This is a synonym for the devil himself. And yet we named our NASA missions after the devil. By the way, Apollo is the name of the Greek sun god, and On is the name of another name for Osiris. Yes, the Egyptian sun god who was worshipped in Egypt. And remember, we talked about the connection with the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid at the turn of the millennium and the connection with the moonshots. Now, here's an item for you that's very interesting. Talks about On January 15th, 1996, the Space Shuttle Endeavour just happened to be orbiting the Earth. Now remember, that's January the 15th. 1 plus 5 equals 6. It's in the year 96, so we have 9 and 6. Add 96 together, you get 15. It says, according to Reuters news service on that day, on this shuttle mission were made or involved 2 spacewalks by astronauts of exactly 6.5, that's 6.5 hours each. You add the 6.5 together, these 2 spacewalks, what do you get? 13. The supernatural number 13. My friends, I want to make you aware that all of the NASA program is permeated with occult numbers and symbols. Here's another one, for example. This is from the Arms Control Today magazine. Talks about from way back in 1992. It's a Star Wars program under increasing attack. That particular headline is of little significance. But what it says before is interesting. It says that there was a failed Friday the 13th test of the Exo-Atmospheric Reentry Vehicle Interceptor System of the space program, okay, and the Strategic Defense Initiative. Now, the Exo-Atmospheric Reentry Vehicle Interceptor System, which is called ERIS, E-R-I-S, it failed on Friday the 13th, the test shot. ERIS failed. Well, what is ERIS? Folks, I did some research, and let me tell you what ERIS is. Eris is the name of the Greek goddess of chaos and discord. And wasn't there chaos and discord on Friday the 13th when the space shot failed? Did they make it fail on purpose? Was it all occult Masonic ritual on that day? Here's something else interesting. Talk about spies up in NASA. They've been working very closely with the National Security Agency and the CIA and other spy agencies. It says, here's from the Reaper newsletter of 1994, November the 30th. It states, a NASA space shuttle has launched a satellite that has ultrasonic imaging that can see underground to a depth of 13 feet. Now there is no place to hide, except perhaps in a deep cave or a mine. Even going underground, says my good friend who puts out this newsletter, Ori McMaster, even going underground isn't what it used to be. Now, spy satellites and the NASA space shuttle can see you or see things even at a depth of 13 feet underground. That's interesting in itself, but the 13 is sort of interesting too. Now, I want to read you something that really is fascinating, talking about the names of the space shuttles. The names of the space shuttles. I want to read to you from the newsletter, Last Trumpet newsletter of my good friend, Pastor David Myers up in Wisconsin. And he notes the Illuminati plan in cryptic language can be discovered by just simply looking or examining the names of the NASA space shuttles. Well, let's see if he's correct. He says the names in order. By the way, the United States used to have 6 space shuttles, but now only has 5. Remember, they had 6. That number comes up again, the number of the beast. But they only have 5 now. And we'll talk about what happened to the 6 in just a moment. It says the names of these are number 1, Columbia, number 2, Enterprise, number 3, Endeavor, number 4, Discovery, and number 5, Atlantis. If we take that exact order, we will find a hidden message, says Mr. Myers or Pastor Myers. We know, he says, that the name Columbia is taken from Washington, D.C., which is the District of Columbia. And by the way, in my Illuminati research, I found that this is the hidden code word, Columbia, for the United States and its historic New Age mission of bringing in the Aquarian New Age, a new world order for the Illuminati. Columbia, the secret code name of the United States of America. He says in this newsletter, Columbia is the nation where the Illuminati is actively utilizing the government for its own foul purposes. Enterprise is the name given to the plan to bring forth the new world government. Endeavor is the labor required by the Illuminists to bring forth the new world order. And discovery is the discovery of the new empire that is to be brought forth by the Illuminati from the ashes of the old. Atlantis is the name given to the new empire. Of course, as you know, my friends, Atlantis is that great lost continent, the continent that vanished to the bottom of the sea, but someday will re-emerge, some say. Occultist seer Edgar Casey once said we would find Atlantis maybe in the new millennium. Now, if we take all of the names of these space shuttles in order, we come up with an interesting sequence as follows, or a sentence as follows. Quote, Columbia in a great enterprise will endeavor to discover Atlantis. The New Age civilization, Atlantis. Columbia, the United States, in its great enterprise, will endeavor or labor to discover the New World Order, the New Atlantis. But then he goes on to say this. He said, however, it is interesting that the shuttle named Challenger was destroyed. Remember when the shuttle Challenger blew up shortly after takeoff? It was called Challenger 7 because of the astronauts on board. Challenger 7. 7 is the name, the holy name, number of God. The holy number of God. 7, the perfect number. After 6, of course, the number of Satan or the beast. Challenger. Was this their way of saying that God challenges us? He who has the holy number, the heavenly number 7, challenged us and lost. We shall destroy him. This, after all, was the idle boast of Lucifer. Isaiah 14:12 records it. I will be like the Most High. I will ascend to the stars, to the high places of the north. I wonder, were these murders of the Challenger astronauts? It's almost too disgusting to even suggest such a possibility. Well, talk more about the occult nature of this Masonic space program known as NASA. I want you to understand they work very closely with Arthur Clarke, who gave us the book, and then later on the movie, of course, came out based on the book 2001: A Space Odyssey. Then we had 2010, A Space Odyssey, which is the follow-up. They talked in there. They had the black block or stone or monolith known as the Kaaba, the Freemasonists, the Islamicists believe in this black stone monolith that's mentioned in that movie. Also, we found out that it represented Lucifer. So everything about the Space Odyssey 2001 or 2010, this Kubrick movie, this Arthur Clarke, the author, wrote about, talked about the star that someday in the future will come forth and become a second sun. A second son. We will have two sons. The second son is called Lucifer in the Arthur Clarke movie. And yet NASA works very close with this man and helping him with his productions. Another one who works very close with NASA is Mr. Lucas, who put forth the Star Wars epic productions. Star Wars, some of the best-selling movies of all time. They had a little character named Yoda. He was like a deformed dwarf, but they made him into an ancient wise man. Did you know that in Hebrew, the word Yod means the finger of God? And so Yoda would be he who is the very finger of God. I think that's blasphemy, but NASA worked with this. Then something came to my mind. I began to get news reports some years ago from Brazil. First Puerto Rico, then Brazil, about something strange going on. And it seemed to be connected with the NASA space program. The accusation was that NASA somehow was working with alien entities, and they had developed, working with these demon powers, the scientific ability to actually clone creatures in the lab. But they were cloning some type of beast monsters. Now, this seemed to me some kind of a science fiction, but people actually were taking photo shots of these. And farmers and ranchers and doctors and lawyers began to see these. They call them the chupacabra, the goat suckers. And these creatures that they seem to be able to see actually kill some people, especially in the nation of Brazil. I'll show you a newspaper or a magazine article that discussed the chupacabras. This is from Paranoia magazine. And notice here in the sidebar what it says. Down in Brazil, some of the local newspapers reported and the people began to believe that NASA had lost control of at least 3 genetic experiments. And also in Chile, this became well known. Brazil, Chile, Puerto Rico, down in Latin America, the chupacabras. Then here's a kid's book that talks about the NASA space program, Spinning in Space. I found this very interesting. Henry Clausen, former Sovereign Grand Commander of Freemasonry, wrote a book, The Emergence of the Mystical, and he sent it out with a sort of a gossamer thin paper covering it. You don't see many books with a cover, except I guess the X-rated books with their brown paper covers or whatever they send you in the mail when you order that. If you ever did, I've just heard that happen. But this book came to me with a gossamer thin, like an onion skin cover, but it had spider webs all over it from Mr. Clausen's book cover. And then I saw this little book put out by Macmillan and Son Publishers in New York, Spinning in Space. And it talked about that this is actually for kids' book, and it says that one of the experiments in space of NASA, okay, this is just the illustrations in this kid's book, one of the experiments was to bring spiders up into space and to weave webs by these spiders. You might ask, well, what has all that got to do with the occult? Well, of course, the spider is known as a mysterious, evil creature that operates especially in the dark. Here's some of the actual spider webs woven by the spider in space on the space shuttle. A little bit creepy, isn't it? Interestingly enough, they also took honeybees up in space. They allowed Jewish scientists to develop an experiment. NASA did. They took honeybees up in space to see what would happen. And they actually had their little honeycomb and such. You say, what about that? Well, you see in the Old Testament, it tells the Jews, God told the Jews, do not bring the honey of bees into the sanctuary, into the temple. Why? Because the peoples all around them worship the great goddess as the great bee, the queen of the bees. We were the worker bees. She is the great queen. And they would bake little cakes and take their honey and have libations and worship the queen of heaven, they called her, with their honey. And yet here were Jewish scientists with their honey that they took aboard the spacecraft of NASA. Very strange. And then there was Dr. Fetter, America's first veterinarian in space. And my friends, I wish I had more time to talk about it. But did you know that several years ago, this man was given a ride in the space shuttle? The first veterinarian in space. Well, it seemed like a nice thing. But I read in the Associated Press reports that one of Dr. Fettman's, Fettman, one of his experiments involved, listen to this, the beheading of rats. Well, that's pretty odd. Zany, even some people would say. But they said that this veterinarian in space, NASA put out a press release, that he was going to bring with him on the spacecraft tiny guillotines and cut off the heads of the rats as an experiment. Behead the rats with the guillotines? Of course, the Masons, the Illuminists did this during the French Revolution. They developed the guillotine to cut off the heads of Christians and monarchy. And did you know that the book of Revelation says in the last days, Christians will be beheaded for their faith? You know, they think we're rats, don't they? I don't know this veterinarian, but why would NASA allow such gruesome, ghastly experiments? Has to be something with occultism. Now let me tell you a little bit about a man named Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons. You see, there is a group in the United States called Scientology that's was connected with Aleister Crowley. L. Ron Hubbard founded Scientology. It's a horrible religious system. And he founded it, I believe, based on what he called Dianetics, which he got, I'm convinced, although they will deny this, of course, from Aleister Crowley, the man who called himself the Beast, 666, the Great Beast, the British Satanist. He was a good friend of L. Ron Hubbard's. And they developed a secret order they called the OTO. Okay? The secret order. The order of OTO. A secret society that was headquartered out of California and also Europe. And a man named Jack Parsons was made a high priest of this satanic church, the OTO. Jack Parsons. Who was Jack Parsons? Jack Parsons just happened to be a rocket scientist. A rocket scientist connected with NASA. In fact, it was Jack Parsons who developed the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, the JPL. Some people say it was named the Jet Propulsion Laboratory JPL after him. Jack Parsons Laboratory, JPL, for the initials. He was a man who had incest with his mother in satanic ceremonies. He and friends had something they call Babylon working ritual for Satan worship out in the desert once. And Jack Parsons, this rocket scientist, who is one of the most well-known rocket scientists in the history of NASA, it is said that he had weird sexual rituals out in the desert in an attempt to impregnate a woman and bring forth the Antichrist to earth. She would become impregnated and her son would become the Antichrist. His name, secretly, would be Apollo. I want to tell you a little bit about this. The Freemason organizations, the clandestine lodges of Freemasonry were involved in this. They call this the Magica Sexualis. Now I want you to understand that Jack Parsons, his father was very, very wealthy. He owned Alice Chalmers Manufacturing. They made tractors and many other things. Remember the OTO. Now I want to tell you the official name of that is the Ordo Templi Orientis. Did you know that NASA has named one of the sites up in space? They have named it after Jack Parsons, to honor Jack Parsons. He was very heavy into the Hollywood crowd, and they began to make movies. I believe Capricorn 1, about the moon landing being a hoax, came out of the Parsons network. And even today, many people in Hollywood know of Parsons and his sexual cult. By the way, I believe he was murdered by the CIA in an explosion, a rocket experiment, and exploded and killed him. They went to tell his mother, and the very same day they found her murdered. Now, when we're talking about people and the satanic connection with NASA, I must tell you also about a man named Carroll Quigley who taught at Georgetown University. I was reading from a journal about recent deaths. It talked about Carroll Quigley. He died at the age of 66 of a heart attack, and one wonders whether that was true. Remember Carroll Quigley? Bill Clinton said he was his mentor. And Carroll Quigley wrote a book, Tragedy and Hope, which exposed the whole secret society satanic network for decades. And yet Carroll Quigley said he agreed with it. He approved their goals. He was one of them. And he was given access to their secret records. Remember, Georgetown University, a Catholic Jesuit university. And he taught there for 35 years, it states in this obituary. But I was reading the obituary and I found out something very interesting. It says here that Carroll Quigley, the mentor for President Bill Clinton, and I believe an occultist, who actually allowed us to get a glimpse with his book Tragedy and Hope of this secret society. It says that he was a staff member of the House Committee, the House of Representatives, that organized the National Aeronautics and Space Agency, or NASA. He was a founding member, then a staff member, of the House Committee that founded NASA. Very interesting. Not too long ago, a friend of mine, Dr. James Hawley, in Beaumont, Texas, this is a letter he sent to me. He's he's not only a medical doctor, he's head of mission and ministry to men. And he wrote to me about Baylor University and its Masonic connections. And he said the head of Baylor is Dr. Herbert H. Reynolds. And he is a high-level Mason. And he talked in his letter to me about the incident where Dr. Reynolds, now this high-level Mason, had accused anyone who opposes Freemasonry as being demagogues. And once he even attacked a lowly student and called the student aberrant because the student wanted to know where Dr. Reynolds stood on Freemasonry. Of course, this will tell you where he stands on Freemasonry. This is the Masonic Order's own publication, the Scottish Rite. And here is a picture. This building in the back is a picture of one of the structures there at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, where, by the way, the FBI, the CIA, and the others plotted and killed the Branch Davidians nearby. Notice two pictures. Bottom, it says, by the way, it says Special Issue, Freemasonry and Religion. Baylor is a Southern Baptist university. But it says here is Herbert Reynolds, 33rd degree, the current president of Baylor University. This was as of 1993. On the left-hand side, it says Abner V. McCall, 33rd degree, President Emeritus. In other words, he once was the president and still is honored as the President Emeritus of Baylor University. They're being honored by the Scottish Rite organization. Then I got a Masonic profile. Yes, the Masons, they put out biographies, bios of the men that they most want to tell you are great men of Freemasonry. Here's the Masonic profile or biography on Herbert Reynolds, president of Baylor University, the man who blasts his own students if they oppose the evil order of Freemasonry. And I was reading, it talks about him being a former Air Force officer, and it says that he has a doctorate of philosophy degree in experimental psychology. I think that's quite interesting. It says he is a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason and a licensed psychologist. He's also a deacon at the First Baptist Church of Waco. But listen to this. When he graduated from Baylor in 1961, he was assigned to the Biomedical Research Laboratory in Alamogordo, New Mexico, where he was responsible as Director of Research for carrying out a variety of research activities associated with the United States Space Program, specifically the Project Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo NASA endeavors. Later, he was named establishing commander of the Human Resources Research Laboratories in San Antonio. It goes on to say here that we believe he will do the utmost to help guide Baylor to its destiny. Interesting, isn't it? We talk more and more about these things. Here's something talks about Buzz Aldrin, the 33rd degree Mason, who planted the Masonic flag on the moon and declared this is the territory belonging to the Supreme Mother Council of Freemasonry. Here's just an article in a magazine, Solutions Television magazine of all places. I wanted you to know about it. It says that he was on television and he talked for a group calling itself the Points of Light Foundation. Remember 1,000 Points of Light of George Bush? Remember one of the founding fathers of the Skull and Bones? Not really founding, but I mean modern day founders. The Skull and Bones actually goes back to the 1830s, founded by a German order of the Illuminati. But here we have Buzz Aldrin at the Points of Light Foundation Awards ceremony. I'd like you to take a close-up look here at the symbol of the Points of Light Foundation. I believe this is occultism, and I discussed and exposed it In my book, Dark Majesty, The Magic of 1,000 Points of Light. It is magic. Notice the symbol. Does it look like a torch? Maybe. Or is it a man and a woman in a hidden sexual position, facing each other, face to face, nose to nose, forehead to forehead? Is that what it is? The points of light? Well, it's sort of interesting, is it not? Well, here's some interesting information from my good book, Dennis Cudahy. He wrote the book Dawning of the New Age World Order. He talks about the Points of Light Foundation and George Bush and many other things in this. But he also says that all of this is connected with the CIA, and particularly with a New Age former astronaut, Edgar Mitchell. He says Edgar Mitchell has the group called the Institute of Noetic Sciences in San Francisco, which promotes psychic research. And he works closely with Stanford Research Institute, SRI. And Mitchell also is sort of a biggie instructor at CIA headquarters. You know, I got an invitation, believe it or not, in the mail. I'm sure many others did too, to join former astronaut Edgar Mitchell's Noetic Sciences Foundation, a nonprofit group. He says here it was founded in 1973 by Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell. And they want to help develop human capacities for health, healing, and well-being through mind powers. And connection, I suppose, with some kind of outer space forces or something. Here's just a little card that came with it that shows the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Here's from a Time Life book called Psychic Powers, Time Life Books. Published, by the way, out of Alexandria, Virginia. You know, Alexandria just happened to be there in Egypt, one of the names of the cities where they had the great library of Egypt. Here's a picture of Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, from this book. And it states that Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, conducted scientific psychic experiments on the moon. He tried to send ESP symbols telepathically to psychics on Earth. Here's some of the cards. Notice that symbol. That's the symbol of Aquarius, the age of Aquarius, the age of the water bearer. Those are like waves of the ocean or something. The unholy trinity. See, those waves are also serpentine, like serpents. And he attempted to send these symbols on these cards telepathically to psychics back on Earth. Did you know they're spending your taxpayer dollars for these psychic experiments? Then we have the man who headed the Wind Star Foundation, Wind Star, you know, like the wind, you know, Lucifer or Satan being the power of the air, prince of the power of the air, the Bible says. Here's a man. His name is John Denver. He's a singer. You know, I used to like the man's songs. Here's a news clip. He wanted to be an astronaut. He passed away some years in an aircraft accident. At least they say it was an accident. But here he is taking the physical given by the NASA Space Agency to see if he might be eligible for a space shot. Somehow he said he was psychically connected with the astronaut program. And he wanted to fly. But listen, he didn't want to fly on an American flight. He wanted to fly on a Soviet, a Russian space mission to foster world peace. That's the old New Age philosophy, as you know. In my book, New Age Culture and Religions, I talk about the Wind Star Foundation of John Denver. Talk about how it's been funded by Amway and other groups, by the way. Now, here's something. This is from the Northern Light Masonic Orders magazine. And they talk about stamps. How many stamps in the world are, give honor and glory to Masons and to Masonic projects. Here, for example, is a picture of a stamp that was put out by the country of Romania in January 1964 to honor astronaut Leroy Cooper. They call him Brother Leroy Cooper. Look at this. A stamp to honor Masonic brother. My research shows that the Romania Masons, the lodge there, honored astronaut Cooper. I think it's of some interest. Now, this, my friends, is really of great interest to me. This is out of the Scottish Rite Journal, October 1994. October of 1994. Talks about the Apollo 11 display at the House of the Temple. That's international headquarters of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the largest Masonic organization in the world. They had an Apollo 11 display on the 25th anniversary of man's first walk on the moon. Remember I told you that Colonel Edwin E. Buzz Aldrin, it says here, in fact, that Colonel Aldrin, 33rd degree, a Scottish Rite Freemason, visited the House of the Temple for this 25th anniversary celebration. Also, it says, on hand was Kenneth Kleinecht, 33rd degree, manager for the command and service modules for the Apollo space program in 1969. That's this picture right here, my friends. This is Kenneth Kleinecht, 33rd degree Mason, the highest level. Manager of the command and service modules for the Apollo space program in 1969 when they did the moonshot. And there he is with all of the regalia and all of the things there on this display at the House of the Temple, which resides, by the way, in Washington, D.C., exactly 13 blocks from the White House. Remember the number, the magical number 13. Here they are in 1994, the 25th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. Kenneth S. Kleinecht there with Buzz Aldrin, astronaut who set foot on the moon, supposedly 33rd degree. Now, it goes on to say that Kenneth Kleinecht, the man you see here, the manager for the Apollo space programs at NASA, is the brother of Sovereign Grand Commander C. Fred Kleinecht, the head, the international head of Freemasonry. This is his brother who was head of the Apollo moonshot, the modules. That's the actual craft, the spacecraft. No wonder that spacecraft was named Aquarius. And no wonder the landing craft, when it landed, was called the Eagle. And the voice came over all the world on our TV screens. The Eagle has landed. The Eagle of Freemasonry landed on Tranquility Base, the Sea of Tranquility on the moon. And it goes on to talk about that a number of other people involved, 33rd degree Masons now, were there. This is right out of the Scottish Rite Journal. By the way, to confirm this, I wrote a letter and I got an email back from the Supreme Mother Council. Wrote me back, Dear Living Truth Ministries. That's what we used to be called here at Power Prophecy. This is back in 1998. Thank you for your inquiries via email. C. Fred Kleinecht, 33rd degree, present Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, Southern Jurisdiction, has a brother, Kenneth Samuel Kleinecht, who retired in 1981, 8 plus 1 equals 9, from the position of Assistant Manager of the Space Shuttle Orbiter Project Office at the NASA Johnson Space Center after 39 years. 3 to 9 equals 27, 2 plus 7 equals 9. Again, you have concealed number 666. 39, a very interesting number. 3 13s. 3 13s, remember that. After 39 years of distinguished service to NASA, he is a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason. Signed by John Betjer, Managing Editor of the Scottish Rite Journal. Now let's look at Buzz Aldrin. Here's a picture of him. They interviewed him in, of all things, Psychology Today. Remember I told you about the mind control in the Psychology Today magazine, May, June 2001. There's Buzz Aldrin. I wish I had a better picture of this. I couldn't find my magazine. It's in color somewhere in my files. I've got, rooms of files here at the ministry. I want you to notice something about this picture, though. This is from Psychology Today. Notice the strange look on Buzz Aldrin's face, and notice his hand. It's in a Masonic Rosicrucian framework. Notice the 3 fingers crossed over his body, over his heart, and going into the pocket as if to hide something. The three fingers. The unholy Trinity. Notice something else. We have the triangles. All of the triangles of the unholy Trinity. Even the Psychology Today, notice they ran on a little plot here. Down to earth, Buzz Aldrin. Look at all the triangles. Every letter conformed to a triangle. Are they not? But I want you to notice up here, over his head. I want you to see something. Notice the triangle over his, right behind him, probably on the wall. Do you notice that? Now I want you to see something else, my friends. This triangle is there. What is it all about? Is it on some spacecraft? I know of no triangle, but look very carefully, if you will, right here. This is the cross. And it has interposed all of these parallel crossings. This is another Masonic symbol, I believe, of great evil, along with the triangle. Very interesting. It says that Buzz Aldrin flew to the moon in 69. Remember, 6 plus 9 equals 15. 1 plus 5 equals 6. He returned to Earth as an American icon, as a moonwalker. But then he had his problems. He became an alcoholic. He's been a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. His marriage ended. But now today he lives in Southern California and he drives cars with license plates, he and his wife, reading Mars Guy and Moon Gal. Sort of interesting, isn't it? By the way, you might wonder about this hand sign that he has. Let me read to you from the book, The Axis of Death. The Axis of Death. Published out of Greece, of no less. Here's just a couple of pages out of the book. I have the book in my library. It's called The Axis of Death. Notice the spider and the web. Interesting. It's called The Vatican Masonry Zionism. Disclosing the Enemies of God, Humanity, Freedom, and Democracy by Dr. D.C. Yermak. Notice the triangle here. From the spider's web coming out. The triangle. Now, what I wanted to read to you as you looked at this picture now of Buzz Aldrin doing his little thing with his fingers, let me read to you from page 266 of this book. It says, the Rosicrucians, now that's a secret order connected to Freemasonry, but very much into magic alchemy. The Freemasons make their secret sign with 3 fingers united, making the sign of an arrow, to remove themselves from God's blessings and leave them exposed to the arrows of the devil. Wow. Is that what that's all about? And by the way, you could either make the right or the left pocket. The left is the evil. The right is the, supposedly, the right is you're the good occultist. And I see he uses the left, which would indicate he's the evil occultist. By the way, even some of their spacecraft, here's building a better spaceship. By the way, this is from the American Statesman newspaper, but it was published across the nation. Lockheed Martin, it's one of the contractors for the NASA space program. This is their, listen to this, X-33 aircraft. And what is it in the shape of? Well, of course, it's in the shape of a triangle or a pyramid, naturally. And naturally, it's experimental, or X. X being the sign of Osiris, by the way. X-33. I wonder if it just happened to be that number. Did they really have 32 other projects, and this just happened to be 33? I don't think so. But 33 is the highest level of initiation in Freemasonry. Now, let's continue on with our little talk about this. Remember the eagle. I want to mention the eagle. The double-headed eagle. You say, well, tell me, Tex, about that double-headed eagle. I want to see evidence. I want to see evidence that actually that was indeed planted on the moon by Buzz Aldrin. Give me the evidence. Show it to me. Well, okay, I can do that. This is from a book published by Time Life Books called Ancient Wisdom and Secret Sects. Ancient Wisdom and Secret Sects. This is from a whole collection of books put out by Time Life Library and sold in the hundreds of thousands by television, by magazine, and so forth across the nation. Now, on page 112 is an interesting little tidbit of information. There is a picture. It is the very picture of the flag that Buzz Aldrin carried with him secretly to the moon on his Apollo mission. And the first men who landed on the moon, I believe, had an occult Masonic ceremony there. Notice it says Supreme Council, 33rd degree, Southern Jurisdiction, USA. There is a Northern Jurisdiction, but they work together. The Southern Jurisdiction is the headquarters of International Freemasonry. And look at the little symbol there. Remember I told you, very much, remember the perverted cross of Freemasonry I told you was right behind the head of Buzz Aldrin in Psychology Today magazine. There you have another perverted cross, just a little bit familiar and alike the other one, but a little bit different also. Then on the other side over here you have the Masonic square and symbol. Remember, I showed you the Apollo crew that had that supposedly the ancient instrument of navigation. It looked just like that, did it not? And then we had the double-headed eagle with a crown. That's a symbol that Lucifer will consolidate heaven and hell, overcome God, and be the king over all. He is the eagle. He is the eagle that will soar into the heavens and overcome God. That is the secret meaning of this. Whether Buzz Aldrin knew this, I do not know. But why would he bring this? And why wasn't this shown by Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather, all of the other talking heads of television? Why in all these years will they refuse to talk about this secret flag that went to the moon? I think that's an interesting thing. By the way, received some help from a friend who told me that the word in Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew language, the name for the bird eagle also means the same thing as lacerator. One who lacerates or bites or crushes the flesh. It's sort of an interesting thing. I was thinking more about it. Here is from a building over in France. Shows an evil black bird. I don't know if it's an eagle or not. Would look at that satanic creature right next to it. You see the fascination of the occult with the black birds, whether it be ravens or crows or even eagles, although eagles, of course, have the white bald head. I want to show you a verse in the Bible that is absolutely amazing. I believe it has significance. When we see the lodge of the double-headed eagle, and that's what it really is, planting its sign, its emblem of evil on the moon with our taxpayer dollars by a 33rd degree, now he's 33rd degree Mason, Buzz Aldrin. I have to take you to the book of Obadiah in the Bible, verse 4. Let me read you this. Listen what God says about this. I think this is prophetic. He says, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence, in other words, from there, will I bring you down, saith the Lord. By the way, talk more about the triangle. Here's from an article from the European magazine. Is it a bird? It's a plane? No, it's a triangle. And it says that the European Space Agency is developing triangles up in space electronically. Equilateral laser triangles with sides 3 million kilometers long to pick up ripples created by bizarre objects such as black holes out in space. Here's another sign that we seem to go a little batty among our NASA and Air Force groups. There's the stealth aircraft, and of course there's the classic shape of the triangle. In fact, several triangles together for the stealth aircraft. Now, have something here that is absolute. By the way, before we go to that, I want to talk to you about a book that came out in 1997 from the University of Arkansas Press. They even have their academicians. William L. Fox wrote this book. It's entitled The Lodge of the Double Eagle. A friend of the ministry sent me some excerpts out of this book. Here it says Luther Smith is being presented of this lodge of the double-headed eagle. they have a lodge named that, Masonic Lodge, is being presented the Scottish Rite flag carried to the moon on April 11th by Edwin Buzz Aldrin, who visited the Grand Commander of the state of Arkansas and presented him the flag. There's Buzz Aldrin to your right, and on the left is the Grand Commander of Arkansas Freemasons, and there, brought back from the moon, is the flag that had been planted there. Thought that was very fascinating. And by the way, in this book there's also pictures of other famous Freemasons. Carl Albert is there. He was former Speaker of the House of Representatives. There is a famous man, Wilbur. He had to leave the Congress after a sex scandals from Arkansas. There we know of this man, Dole, a 33rd degree Mason. Bob Dole ran for president, was Senate Majority Leader. Then we have Lloyd Benson, also Senator from the state of Texas, U.S. Senator, right here. And Lloyd Benson, of course, was a Bilderberger and a member of their little group. Now, let's talk about something else. It was called Tranquility Lodge number 2000 chartered. Tranquility Lodge number 2000 chartered. It says, in the summer of 1999, 9 plus 9 equals 18. Of course, 1 and 8 equals 9, the number 666 concealed. Dr. Duncan Howard, 33rd degree of Texas, and a member of the Valley of Waco, Texas, chapter of Masonry, published a story in the Messenger, a publication of the Grand Lodge. He says, the essay's publication resulted in legislation passed by the Grand Lodge of Texas to charter a new Masonic Lodge called the Tranquility Lodge, number 2000, named after the Sea of Tranquility on the moon. On July 20th, 1969, the article continues, 2 American astronauts landed on the lunar surface, known as Mare Tranquillitatis, Sea of Tranquility. One of them was Edwin Buzz Aldrin, 33rd degree of Seabrook, Texas, a member of Clear Lake Lodge number 1417. Now listen to what this article in the March 2000 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal says about their brother, Buzz Aldrin, 33 degree, and the mission that he had been given during the moonshot and the landing back in 1969. I'll read it to you direct, so there'll be nobody can say I'm misquoting or taking out of context. It states, quote, Brother Aldrin carried with him, that's carried with him to the moon, a special deputation from then Grand Master J. Guy Smith, 33rd degree, constituting and appointing Brother Aldrin as special deputy of the Grand Master and granting him full power to claim Masonic territorial jurisdiction on the moon. Did you get that, friends? Here's the astronaut. Here's the moonshot. Billions of dollars of taxpayer money going forth. And here was this astronaut, he and Neil Armstrong being the first to step on the moon, and he brings with him secretly this double-headed eagle flag, and he has a document with him that he brought with him, giving him authority from the sovereign Grand Commander of all of Freemasonry, giving him authority, it says, quote, granting him full power to do what? To claim Masonic territorial jurisdiction on the moon. Friends, they own the moon. Whoever lands there first and puts their flag down owns it. That's the tradition of the discoverers throughout human history, is it not? When Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas, supposedly he put down the Spanish flag. Now we have Buzz Aldrin with the Masonic flag, the double-headed eagle. And he has been granted the authority. You see, the King and Queen of England granted Christopher Columbus the authority to claim territorial jurisdiction for any new lands that he found. And here Buzz Aldrin was granted full power, it says, to claim Masonic territorial jurisdiction on the moon. But that's not all. There's more. It goes on to say, any member in good standing of a regular Masonic lodge can become a member of Tranquility Lodge. Now, they have opened up and established a lodge called the Tranquility Lodge. Remember, I told you the Sea of Tranquility. Tranquility Base is where the astronauts landed on the moon. Now they have a Masonic lodge on the moon. Tranquility Lodge, number 2000. And if you're a Mason, you can join this lodge on the moon. It says by payment of a one-time fee of $100 and such annual dues as are adopted by the lodge. It says the lodge will hold stated meetings at least 4 times per year until such time as it can relocate to its rightful place in or near the Sea of Tranquility on the moon. And upon relocation, it shall apply to this Grand Lodge for charter as a regular lodge. There's a Masonic lodge on the moon. Because the moon is the territory, the Masons own it. But I thought we paid for the Apollo mission to the moon. I thought it was the American taxpayers. If anybody should claim territorial jurisdiction, it should be the United States government on behalf of the 275 million citizens of the United States. Maybe we didn't have exactly that many then, but we had near it, maybe 250 million back then. 1969, it became the possession of the Masons. You know, in a book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, Manly P. Hall has been called a great Masonic scholar by the head of Freemasonry. He passed away just a few years ago. He had this very revealing picture of the double-headed Masonic eagle being crowned, and there you have the triangle in the 33rd degree, and the rays of the sun god above him. Below the words the letters INRI, a lot of people say, oh, that has to do with the cross of Jesus. I've seen those letters, my friends. Let me tell you what that means. It's a Latin inscription, INRI, which means to be created out of the fire of chaos. Alchemy. Alchemy. If you want to see where this double-headed eagle came from, go to books like The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop, the famous classic book out of Great Britain, over 150 years old now. He talked about the double-headed god Janus. The double-headed god Janus. See the double heads of Janus? The double-headed god Janus. Then, from my good friend Dr. Kathy Burns' expose of the Order of the Eastern Star, the Women's Masonic Order. Here is a Masonic and alchemical occult drawing. Notice the two heads come together, the two bodies come together. The androgynous being, male and female, the king and queen, come together as one. The two heads come together as one. This is what the alchemists sought for, their transformation into Godhead, when God would be destroyed and Satan or Lucifer would be exalted. Here is yet another Masonic symbol. Notice their ancient man, who is actually Lucifer, and he is crowned. And you have the serpent of eternity in an egg-like fertility fashion around him, biting his own tail to create a circle. And there you have the hex of Solomon, or the six-pointed star. Even the Jews have wrongly used that today. And what we have there is the black and the white mixing together. As above, so below. Notice Lucifer. His image above is as an old man. But look down below, and you can see it again. As above, so below. In other words, the two heads will come together. Now we turn it up, and we look at the other image. And what do you see? Is it not a diabolical, satanic likeness of Satan? Now, I have here something. I'm not going to say a word. I want to give you something out of William Cooper. He was killed by federal authorities working with local law enforcement because of a dispute he had with the IRS, which I think is very interesting. But William Cooper wrote a book, Beyond the Pale Horse, in which he exposed a lot of these things. And on his website, I found this particular item. Some of the occult symbology, I believe William Cooper, the late William Cooper, is exactly right in what he had to say. And now, let me give you some more information. You remember we told you about the emblem of Apollo 13? Here it is in the book entitled Apollo 13 by Jim Lovell, the astronaut, and Jeffrey Kluger. Apollo 13. Remember I talked to you about that? Look at the chariot, the white horses, and the sun, and the name Apollo. I told you they were of occult mythological origins. Here, from the Philadelphia magazine of April 1997, is the frontispiece, the front page out of an ancient Masonic book. It is, in fact, their constitutions. Almost every Masonic lodge in the United States will probably have a copy of this book. Here it is right here. I want you to look above that on this. Now remember, this is sort of like their constitution. It tells the lodge how to operate, how to carry on the ritual, and so forth, and who shall be the officers of the lodge, and so forth. This ancient book. In fact, it's the Book of Constitutions from London, 1723. And I want you to see the symbol at the top. Is that not Apollo? Is that not where they got the idea for their emblem? From this Masonic textbook organization. In my book, Ravaged by the New Age, I wrote this book many years ago. It's called Satan's Plan to Destroy Our Kids. Ravaged by the New Age. You need to get a copy of this. It has some of the most amazing information in it. And I know God inspired me to write this and expose things. And you know, at that time I was just beginning my research into the Masonic order and to NASA and the space program. But I actually began to look at the badges and these emblems of NASA. And I have a section on page 71 called NASA's Space Program and the New Age. I report in here, for example, from the Wall Street Journal article, reporting that the space agency NASA paid New Age teacher Werner Erhard of EST Seminars Training, he's a New Age guru, Werner Erhard, paid him $45,000 to train its executives. on New Age management. Amazing. And by the way, Earhart brought them sort of a blend of Scientology, psychology, and Buddhism is what he basically taught. I talked about Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, and then I talked about the fact that they were selling their patches to kids to put on jackets and so forth. The NASA patches. But kids shouldn't wear these patches. Why? I stated, for example, there was the three rainbow circles, the red sun god, the great X of Osiris, the Pegasus horses with the sun sign, the sun god face, the ghost eagle, the infinity 8, the sign of Mars, the god of war. And then I gave, although it is in black and white, I gave pictures of some of these occultic symbols that you find in the NASA patches. Now let's conclude, if we could, my friends. This has been a long 2-hour odyssey or journey, has it not? We've looked at the occult and Masonic basis. We've looked of the space program. We've looked at the alchemy and the magic of the space program. I believe people believe in NASA and the space program because of the scientific nature of it. People don't want to believe in the Bible, although I'm convinced it is a book of science, a book of science, of math or numbers, a book of history, of geometry, a textbook of textbooks. But not too long ago, I was reading a newspaper and I came across an incredible quote by a man who, I'll be very honest with you, was an atheist. His name was George Bernard Shaw. And he at least admitted to a little bit of the damage he had done. And here on the screen, I'm going to give you this quote, and I want to close with this because I think it's profound to come from an atheist, a hater of God, who mocked God. And I once read an essay in which he mocked Christians and said, how stupid can they be? Basically, I'm just summing what he said. He was a believer in science and evolution. Those who believe in NASA and the space program and would not at all give any credit at all to what I said, because they would say it just can't be. These scientists cannot be. These high-level executives at NASA, this federal program, they cannot, this world-renowned program, they cannot possibly be involved in the occult, in Freemasonry. But they are. But listen to what George Bernard Shaw, the atheist, said about science. He said, the science to which I pinned my faith is bankrupt. Its tales were more foolish than all the miracles of the priests. What is spread was not an enlightenment, but a malignant disease. Its counsels, which should have established the millennium, have led directly to the suicide of Europe. I believed that is science's superstitions. For in their name I helped to destroy the faith of the millions of worshipers in the temples of 1,000 creeds. George Bernard Shaw destroyed the faith of many. I wonder if people today are saying, if there's life on other planets. And remember, NASA came out and went out on a limb, and they fell off the limb claiming there was life on Mars. They found a Mars rock to prove it. I wonder if some people put more stock in our space program than they do God. You know, the cosmonauts of Russia were asked, some of them were asked, did they see God when they went in outer space? And they laughed. They said there was no God there. They were communist atheists. It's a sad thing, my friends, but you know God will have his last laugh. God, the God that created the heavens and the earth, the God that is going to create a new heaven and a new earth when he comes. Let us pray for these so-called men of science. They have actually abandoned true science, which is God's science, for the superstitions of witchcraft and Satan, and for the traditions of men. God have mercy on them. This is Tex Mars. You've been watching The Eagle Has Landed.